This is Dr. Rosie Kuhn, and this podcast series is called Spiritual Immersion, Taking the Plunge. And the intention of these podcasts is to support and empower you to be present with what is in your life, be present with who you are inside the experience of your life, and ask the questions of yourself that you wonder, like, who am I? What am I doing? What am I supposed to be doing? And all of those questions that are really hard to ask. And so this podcast series is to help you ask those questions and be present to the answers. Quite often we'll ask the questions and then we move on as if they're rhetorical questions, as if there isn't any answer to those questions, when in truth there's huge, really, really valuable, important answers to be listened to as you're listening to yourself in that process. Today I wanted to talk about and focus on that part of you that, much like I said, you have questions and you don't actually answer those questions, or you have perspectives on what's true or what's important or values that other people should be attending to, values that are yours, but maybe you're not actually walking your talk. Maybe you're not actually living into the values and the principles that you say that are true for you. This is really, really, really common, and usually when we're in a spiritual immersion process, part of that is distinguishing and discerning what is truth, what is your spiritual truth, and are you living into that truth? There's something called a spiritual bypass, which means we talk the talk and we say, yep, that's what I think, that's how it is. And because I know that that's what's true, that's all I need to do is just know that's true and know those values and principles. Well, the fact is that we actually have to walk the talk. We actually have to practice what we preach. We actually have to do the work, have the direct experience of living into those truths and those values. And that sometimes is really so much more difficult than just saying, yep, I believe that. So for instance, this morning I was reading in Oneness about the fact that when I'm living in my highest truth and my highest knowing, which means I'm actually perhaps giving myself what I desire and want, that is not at the detriment of anyone else. So quite often we say, hey, we're all one. I lack nothing. No one lacks anything. And so if I get what I want, doesn't mean somebody else doesn't get it. So in a sense, if I make more money as a coach, some people would say, well, that would mean somebody else isn't going to make money. Somebody else isn't going to have those clients. Or if I have whatever it is I want, for instance, if I want to build a house, you guys have heard me talk about wanting to build a house. That means that there's, on some level, there's a part of me that says, yeah, but if I build a house, that means I'm using up trees and I'm using up materials that perhaps are not ecologically sound. And so I feel bad about that. But the truth is, if I believe in principle that everything is creation, everything is 100% expression of the universal source of all that is, then when I'm in my highest truth about what it is that I want to create through this house, this structure, it's all good. And there's that point where I go, wait a second, that can't be true because, and then we fill in the blank with our logical, rational consensus reality of what is ecologically sound or financially sound or what that means. One person asked, I'm 68, and this woman said, what's the point of you building a house? You're getting old. It's like, from her perspective, I have limited resources in terms of the number of years I'll be on the planet. However, I could be on the planet for another 20 or 30 years. That's a long time to live in a house. So all these places where we can say one thing, but then our consensus reality or a logical, rational mind or our judgments show up and say something else. So this happens a lot in this process of spiritual immersion, where we're discerning, well, what is true? Byron Katie in her work talks about the 4 questions. She says something, or a client will say something, or a person will say something, and she'll say, is that true? And they'll say something, and she'll say, is that really true? And that's where we're really having to discern our truth, our highest truth, our knowing, our universal source and principles of all that is, from that which we live, in a sense, our consensus view of reality. And this is a really important, you're going to hear me say that again. It's really important to be able to distinguish what I say is true, my values, my principles, in terms of my spiritual principles, and am I actually living into those principles? And we're living into those principles one incremental step at a time, because those are huge principles. Love thy neighbor as thyself, huge. To love without coveting, to love without desire, to love without judgment, without meanness, without they have it and I don't, the lack. That's really, really challenging. And all we can do is one incremental element of that at a time. And that means watching and observing and being mindful of how I'm being in this moment with what I say is true. And that's what we're doing for every single principle, every single moment of our life. We can't live from the past. You've heard this before. We can't live the future because that doesn't exist. We live in this moment based on what I truly believe is the principle I want to live by right now. In the Course in Miracles, it says, I can have the kind of day I want. Now, first of all, do I believe that? I can have the kind of day I want. I can have peace. I can have abundance. I can have joy and playfulness. I can have whatever I want. Do I believe that? I have to decide whether I believe that. It's a yes or no. It's not a, well, sort of, kind of, I can sort of have it. It's a yes or it's a no. And in that declaration, then, I'm saying I'm 100% potentiality. I can have the day I want. I'm 100% potentiality for having the kind of day I want. Now, I have to believe that 100%. And that's the thing, the element of our spiritual principles is we have to believe them 100%. And then we have to choose to act upon those or not. So quite often people will say, I know I'm universal source of all that is. I know the abundance that's mine from universal source. And then they'll say period, and then they'll say, but, I need to find a job, or I need to do this, or I need to do that, which is a fear-based, generally speaking, fear-based, lack-based part of consensus reality. So as we become more clear about, I'm saying I believe in universal source of all that is, and that abundance is here for me. And then I negate that by saying, but I have to, because I lack and live in a fear-based society, a fear-based reality. Now we've negated the perspective and the principle. So living in that place of, yes, I believe that, I'm universal source of all that is, I'm 100% potentiality, and I'm 100% responsible for having that show up in my life. That's all true. That's all, from my perspective. There's no one to blame. There's no shame. There's no nothing. There's just that truth. And now I have to live into that one step at a time, one moment at a time. And that's the practice. Do I believe it today? Do I believe it now in this moment? If I believe it now in this moment, what's my action based on what I'm wanting for my day, for my moment? So again, being present to that discernment, the clarity of what you say is true in terms of spiritual principles. It's really important to write these down. If you're not clear, write them down. And then notice how you're living, whether you're living within those principles or you're living based on the yes, but my mother said, the society says, my marketing coach says, my career coach says. It's like, what's your truth? What's your knowing? And that's really, really important. And the continuation of practicing this, it's not like you're ever it's not like you're going to get it right eventually. I get it more right. I've been doing this work for a long time. I get it more right, and I live in that place that it's kind of uncomfortable sometimes to go, yeah, I know this is true, but it's really scary to live in that that practice of knowing that. And it's not like I'm disregarding the other knowing. It's still there if I want to. I can say anytime I want to, I'm going to go back to being afraid. I can do that anytime I want to. So that's my dog, Gracie. And she's having a moment. So we get to decide any moment which place we're going to live in, is in our fear or in our no fear place. All right, I'm going to end right now. Go take care of Gracie. Big hugs. Bye for now.